Okay, today we're doing a deep dive into a really pivotal chapter in Exodus, chapter 19.
Right. This is where things really shift, you know? The whole relationship between God and Israel gets defined here.
Exactly. So the scene is set. The Israelites have arrived. Where are they?
They're in the desert of Sinai. It's been, what, 3 months since the whole Egypt ordeal?
3 months. And they've camped right there, basically at the foot of Mount Sinai.
Yep, right in front of the mountain. There's this sense of anticipation. You feel it in the text.
And straight away, Moses goes up the mountain.
Uh-huh. The Lord calls to him from the mountain, so it's initiated by God.
Okay, so what's the first message God gives Moses for the people?
Well, it starts with looking back, a reminder. God says, basically, you saw what I did to the Egyptians.
Okay, grounding it in their very recent experience.
Exactly. And then this amazing phrase, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself.
Wow, eagle's wings. That's incredibly evocative. It's not just rescue, it's tender,
Yeah,
purposeful.
definitely. Bringing them to God. But then, interestingly, it pivots right away.
How so?
From that rescue image, it moves straight to, like, a proposal, a condition.
Uh-huh.
God says, now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant. So there's an if.
Right. So the deliverance leads immediately into, okay, here are the terms for our ongoing relationship.
Precisely. And the promise linked to that if is huge.
What is it?
He says they'll be his treasured possession out of all nations.
Treasured possession.
Yeah, and it adds, although the whole earth is mine, you will be the special treasure.
So unique status. What else?
It keeps going. There'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Kingdom of priests. What does that suggest? For a whole nation.
Well, priests usually mediate, right, between
Uh-huh.
God and people. So calling the whole nation that suggests maybe a role for Israel among other nations.
Like representing God to the world or the world to God.
Yep.
A mediatorial function.
Possibly. And also being wholly set apart, it defines their identity right from the get-go. It's about relationship, responsibility, being different for God's purpose.
So it's not just about being special, it's about having a job to do, a way to be.
Exactly. It sounds less like a passive privilege and more like an active calling, a function.
Okay, so Moses brings this huge message, the reminder, the condition, the promise down the mountain. What's the reaction?
Immediate.
Yeah.
And unanimous, it seems. The text says they all respond together.
What do they say?
We will do everything the Lord has said. Just like that. Enthusiastic, yes.
Wow, that's quick agreement to a pretty significant covenant.
It is. So Moses takes this yes back up to God.
And what's God's response to their acceptance?
The plan moves to, like, a public manifestation. God says, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud.
A visible, audible event. Why?
God explains it directly so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you, meaning trust in Moses.
Ah, okay. So it's also about validating Moses' role in front of everyone. Makes sense.
Yeah. But this isn't just going to happen spontaneously. There's prep involved. Serious prep.
What do they need to do?
God tells Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow.
Consecrate them, set
Yeah.
them apart, get them ready for something holy.
Right. And practical steps, too. Have them wash their clothes and be ready on the third day. It's all very specific, very scheduled.
And there's more, right? Something about the mountain itself.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Strict boundaries are set. Put limits around the mountain.
Limits how?
The warning is severe. Be careful that you do not go up the mountain or even touch the foot of it.
Don't even touch it.
Nope. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death.
Death. Just for touching it. That really drives home the idea of the mountain becoming sacred, dangerous ground.
Absolutely. And the way they be put to death is specified to stoning or arrows. Not a hand to be laid on him.
So even the execution avoids direct contact. Why do you think?
Maybe it emphasizes that crossing the boundary makes someone untouchable, sort of lethally contaminated by violating that sacred space. And this applies to animals, too, not just people.
Total exclusion zone. Is there any way they're allowed near?
Only one condition is mentioned. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they go up to the mountain, a specific signal.
Okay, so Moses goes down, tells them all this. They consecrate themselves, wash their clothes.
And Moses adds one more instruction for that third-day preparation.
What's that?
Abstain from sexual relations. Another layer of setting apart physical purification for this encounter.
Right, so the third day finally arrives. What's it like?
It's dramatic. The description is intense. Morning comes and there's thunder and lightning.
Okay.
A thick cloud covers the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast.
Whoa. That sounds terrifying, honestly.
Well, the reaction backs that up. Everyone in the camp trembled. It's clearly meant to inspire awe, maybe fear too.
But Moses leads them closer.
Yeah, he leads them out of the camp, right up to the foot of the mountain, to the boundary line, but not across it.
And the mountain itself, what's happening there?
It's completely engulfed. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire.
Fire, wow.
Yeah, smoke billowing like a furnace, and the whole mountain is shaking violently, trembled violently.
Fire, smoke, earthquakes.
Yeah.
This is a full-on sensory overload display of power.
Totally. And that trumpet sound, it gets louder and louder.
So amidst all this chaos,
Moses speaks, and the text says, the voice of God answered him.
so the people hear it, like God intended.
Presumably within earshot, yeah.
Yeah.
That direct exchange happening right there.
And then God calls Moses up again.
Right. Calls him to the very top, and Moses goes up into the fire and smoke.
Okay, so he's back up with God. Now we get the commandments.
Not quite yet. This is interesting. God gives another warning.
Another one. After all the boundaries and death penalties.
Yep. Tells Moses, go down again and warn the people specifically not to force their way through to see the Lord.
Force their way through, like out of curiosity.
Seems like it. Warns them not to break through the limits, just to try and get a glimpse, because they'll perish if they do.
And it applies even to the priests.
Especially mentioned, even the priests who normally approach God have to reconsecrate themselves or God will break out against them. It underlines the extreme holiness and danger of this specific moment.
But Moses kind of points out that they already set the boundaries, doesn't he?
He does. He says something like, the people can't come up. You already told us to put limits and declare it holy.
It's almost like he's saying, we did what you said. How does God reply?
God basically doubles down, doesn't say, oh yeah, you're right. He says, go down and bring Aaron up with you. But the priests and the people must not force their way through, or I will break out against them.
So the warning stands, even gets reinforced. What's the nugget there? Why the repeated warning?
It really highlights that the danger isn't just accidentally stumbling over a line. It's about presumption, about trying to approach God on human terms, forcing the encounter.
Right. Respecting the sheer holiness and the rules of engagement God is setting.
Exactly. It's not about ignorance anymore. It's about willful boundary breaking. That seems to be the core concern here.
So Moses goes down, relays that message too. And this sets the stage for what comes next, the Ten Commandments in chapter 20.
Precisely. Chapter 19 is the crucial setup, the framing for everything.
So looking back at this whole sequence, you got the arrival, the conditional offer, this amazing identity, treasured possession, kingdom of priests, holy nation.
Then the people's immediate yes.
Followed by intense preparation, consecration, washing, boundaries.
And then the overwhelming arrival of God fire, smoke, trembling, trumpet blasts.
And these really stark, repeated warnings about keeping distance, the lethality of crossing the line.
Yeah.
What does all this tell us about the relationship being forged here?
Well, it's definitely not casual. It shows God's immense power and holiness. That holiness requires separation, preparation, adherence to rules.
Yeah.
It's awesome, in the true sense of the word, inspiring awe, but also fear.
And that term, holy nation, it seems tied directly to this experience.
Absolutely. Being holy here seems deeply connected to respecting these boundaries, following the process, understanding the profound gap between human and divine that requires such careful mediation and rule following. It's less about an internal feeling, perhaps, and more about behavior, position, and respecting that sacred separation.
It's established through this intense, sensory, boundary-focused event.
Yeah. Their identity is being forged right there, in that moment, at the foot of the smoking mountain.
It's quite something. Arrival, covenant proposal, acceptance, prep, and then this. Terrifyingly majestic encounter defined by limits.
Leaves you thinking, for sure.
It really does. So here's something to chew on. Given all this intense preparation, the smoke, the fire, the trembling, the severe warnings and penalties, when God calls Israel a holy nation right here, what does that primarily emphasize? Is it more about achieving some inner state of purity, or is it fundamentally about maintaining that God-ordained separation, following the rules, respecting the boundaries set around divine power? Where does the emphasis seem to lie in this foundational moment?